All right, so you want to are you okay to get started?
Heck yeah.
I'd already started. All right. We already got the intros. We'll just jump right into it. 1357. Okay, at the time of our first episode, Best Seat in the House was in the middle of the publishing process. Quite a bit has happened since then, both exciting and challenging. We're gonna skip the challenge and get right to the exciting. So, what would you like to share with viewers as far as getting the book right now?
It's out. You can get it on Amazon, on Barnes and Noble, on Apple Books, and on the publisher's website, which is Bear Manor, BEARMANOR, one word, media.com. And they also have it. And I'm not sure the ebook is up yet, but I think it is. And if it is, it's cheaper than on Amazon or Barnes and Noble.
But I'll always go physical though, because
Yeah.
in 5 years, if say Sidney Pollack comes to you and says, "I don't really like what you said about me in that story," and then the digital version could always change on you, and then you have the physical version, then you get that uncut Sidney Pollack story before he called and said. That was just
Yeah.
one example that came to mind. But yeah,
Yeah.
the
Well,
physical.
I imagine Sydney might be able to pull that off too, even though he's passed away. He's going to come through and go, "Yo, kid." No.
Yeah.
He was like my second dad. I think I told you that. He taught me a lot. He exposed himself in intellectual ways that he didn't with a lot of people, but it would be at dinner over a glass of wine kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
But he also expected as good as he was giving. He expected a lot from the people who worked with him. But so he was a great teacher, but it was like having my dad there also, because I get spanked if I screwed up.
Yeah. Well, with the book being available now, you can actually, if you're watching this, you can get the digital version now, so you can follow along with us and turn to page chapter 64 in your digital version. That's what we're going to be talking about today. In the spirit of Halloween, there's a little bit of a spooky situation that happens in that chapter.
David McGiffert's book begins with a foreword by screenwriter Bob Gale saying, "There is no shortage of fascinating memoirs about Hollywood. There are memoirs by movie stars, directors, producers, and studio executives. There are memoirs by character actors, composers, film editors, and even cinematographers. And I've read quite a few, but until now, I've never read, much less even heard of, a memoir by an assistant director, which is a shame, because assistant directors, or ADs as we call them, have great tales to tell. An AD is uniquely positioned at the center of a production in all of its moving parts, the conduit between everything and the director. If the production was a human body, the AD is the heart that keeps the blood pumping to all the necessary places. And David McGiffert was the heart of telling many amazing stories. 1976 King Kong, An Officer and a Gentleman, Tootsie, Back to the Future, Rain Man, Batman Returns, The People vs. Larry Flint, Man on the Moon, and Vanilla Sky, just to name a few. Could you imagine getting to peek around the memories of someone with such a fascinating vantage point? Well, imagine no more. Well, not really. Never stop imagining. But imagine no more what it would feel like to peek around the memories of someone with such a fascinating vantage point. In this series, we will talk about the stories behind the stories of David McGiffert's memoir, Best Seat in the House. This is Best Seat with David McGiffert.
The year is 1997. The place is Los Angeles. The film is Red Corner. Red Corner was directed by John Abnett, starring Richard Gere, Bei Ling, and Bradley Whitford. Gere stars as Jack Moore, an American attorney who gets wrongfully arrested while on a business trip to China and finds himself on trial for murder. So this story, before we get into it, it focuses on famed stuntman Buddy Joe Hooker, and with over 208 credits, there's just a handful of highlights. Harold and Maude, Blazing Saddles, Close Encounters of the Third Kind, First Blood, The Outsiders, The Right Stuff, Scarface, Mannequin, Who's Harry Crumb, Lethal Weapon 2, Hard to Kill, Days of Thunder, Godfather 3, Thelma and Louise, Lethal Weapon 3, Last Action Hero, Demolition Man, The Crow, Waterworld, and From Dusk Till Dawn. that's all before Red Corner, what we're going to talk about today. After Red Corner, he'd go on and do Lethal Weapon 4, End of Days, Man on the Moon, Gone in 60 Seconds, Spy Kids, Vanilla Sky, 40-Year-Old Virgin, Grindhouse, and Planet Terror, Superbad, Lost, Dexter, Horrible Bosses, and most recently Free Guy. And with that barely scratching the surface, he's actually, I was trying to get him to surprise us today. He might pop on. I'm still holding out for that. But he's actually working right now as we speak. So we'll see.
Yeah.
He's
always working, and he's my age. And I run into him every once in a while. We go to dinner, he and his wife and Shannon and I go to dinner every once in a while. And he's always electrifying to be around. And that doesn't matter whether it's on the set or at dinner.
Peter and Vera.
And sorry.
Oh, that would have been serendipitous if that was him.
Yeah. Oh, it would have been great, but it is my brother. And he can wait. Thanks, Peter. Okay. Take two. Anyway, go ahead.
I noticed that in those credits, you and Buddy Joe have shared many productions together, and your relationship goes all the way back to high school, which I read in the chapter that we're talking about today. And I was just going to say, can you tell me a little bit about your relationship with Buddy Joe and what it was like working with him?
Well, I met him in high school. He was in the Bad Boys Club. I can't remember what they were called. And I was in the nerd club called the Romans, with a bunch of guys who were really good academically and not particularly gifted athletically. But I had a Jones for football. I went out for B football. I weighed 112 pounds. So then I met this guy who was my size, who qualified to be the other first string halfback. I was on the first string of the little guys team, the B team at North Hollywood High School. In the late 1950s. And this guy just is the same guy that I'm friends with now. He was energetic, outspoken, gifted athletically, and brave, and also had an irreverent streak that goes extremely deep with him, that makes him a formidable person to be around, and wonderful fun. He has an incredible sense of humor, and we did really well on the football team together as a team. We worked together very well. For some reason, I wound up in the movie business. He was always headed that way. I think his dad was a stuntman, and he had early roles even in high school. I think in films and stuff. I'm not dead sure about that, but I'm pretty sure. And so his career trajectory was always toward film, as far as I can figure out. Mine was not. Mine was a series of wall hits until I finally found an open space where I landed on my feet and found a way to make a living in film. And I loved it. And I first saw Buddy Joe doing a really strange movie called Empire of the Ants in Florida. And we had a stunt that we needed to have happen, which was a car goes off a ramp or a little hillside and lands in a settling pond in a giant sugarcane field. We called in Buddy Joe. I was thrilled. I hadn't seen him in years, decades. He brought his brother Hank. He and Hank set up this stunt. We surveyed this pond. We were being very cool about it and everything. But nobody went in the water, and the water was murky. And we knew how deep it was because we stuck sticks in it. And Buddy Joe just said, "Okay, man, I'm going to go. Let's go. I'm going to do it. Let's go." And it sounds more casual than it was. He was very, smart about it. Mm-hmm. But we rolled the cameras. He shot this car into this pond. It landed perfectly and sank so that just the roof line was showing. But he was out of the car in like 12 seconds. Boom! He was on top of the car. and we were like, cut. Whoa! He said, the water is full of water moccasins. Oh. He said, it was unbelievable. He said, they were all over. He said, I never realized. So that was It's Buddy Joe.
It sounded like he was as excited as he was, more thrilled than scared about the fact that he just
He was.
drove into one. That's okay. I'm
He
getting a feel
was
for the personality.
airborne out of the water, just launched himself out of the water. I don't blame him. Everybody on the crew just went white. They're just like, oh my God. John Avnet called me years later, asked if I would come and take over Red Corner that his first AD had. He'd asked me to do it, but we just had our daughter, Natalie, and I was spending the first couple of months with Shannon and Evan and Natalie and not doing anything. And he called me, he said, oh, come on, man. I said, no, I can't do it. But then he called again because his first AD's wife got in a terrible accident. And he said, please, can you now? It was like a month later. And I said, yes, I have to go.
Did you, I'm basing this on IMDb, that you had previously worked with him on Up Close and Personal with Robert Redford not too long before that? Is that accurate?
Maybe. I can't remember that.
So I would just try. What I saw,
it was it was Man on the Moon. I know, but that was after, because then I started calling him for Man on the Moon, for Vanilla Sky and stuff. When I saw a chance that I could get him on a show, I'd do it.
But you worked with Avnet before Red Corner, right? With
yes.
Up Close and Personal. Okay, so there was a little bit of a relationship there.
Yeah. Oh, with Avnet, yes.
Okay.
And he's a very let's see, hard charging director, and things can get tense. Things can get kind of wound up. But he's also a very cool guy, very loyal, and I really liked him, despite the fact that every once in a while he'd set me back on my heels with things. That just happens on the AD. I'm like Bob Zemeckis said, you're the only guy I can yell at. That's kind of how it is. So now I have a chance to actually really catch up with Buddy Joe. And he and Avnet have this terrific relationship, but it's based basically on competition. They're both extremely competitive people. They don't mask it with each other. They just let fly. And Buddy Joe has an irreverent streak. He has a fantastic sense of humor, which, as I write, he uses with great skill during days when there are stunts that tend to make people a little tense. He has this wonderful way of smoothing people out and getting people focused and making it sound easy, even though we know it's not going to be. Mm-hmm. So I loved the chance of getting to know him again. The other thing I found out was that we had both had house fires when we were years before, like in the 60s. And I had lost almost everything I owned, except I had a little trunk somewhere that I had my high school yearbook in. Mm-hmm. Buddy Joe had lost everything, including his high school yearbook. And I don't know how it came up, but I took my high school yearbook and went to a printing place and had him print the whole high school yearbook over again sweet. For him, and gave it to him, as a present. So we had a series of stunts in Red Corner, which was supposed to be taking place in Beijing, China, but we built a 2 or 3 block set, amazing set actually, on the DreamWorks studio backlot, which is built over a very marshy section of Los Angeles, close to the airport, that if there's ever an earthquake there, they call that a liquefaction zone if it's a big one, and the whole thing could just go bloop and disappear. But we used to joke about it.
But before you get to the stunts in the film, I want to
sure.
I want to bring in or at least introduce John Avnet, the other main character in this story. This was his 5th film, coming out of, again, Up Close and Personal with Robert Redford, The War with Kevin Costner and Fried Green Tomatoes with Kathy Bates. His first film was a TV movie called Between Two Women, starring Farrah Fawcett, and before that he directed a few episodes of Call to Glory with Craig T. Nelson and Elizabeth Shue. John was a frequent director on one of my favorite TV series, Justified, and he's actually returning for the revival, which I'm pretty excited about.
He's filming right now.
I saw that. I did. I
Yeah.
saw that on IMDb. I didn't want to quote it though because I wasn't sure. That's awesome. Yeah.
He is.
And then so what was your experience like? Like we have a pretty good idea of how Buddy Joe is on the set. What his personality is like. What's John like to work with?
Well, he expects things to go the way he wants it, as fast as you can get it done and as good as you can get it done. He's not subtle. I mean, if he wants something done, he lets you know, and he lets you know why. He can be called a kind of temperamental, but I don't take it as that. It's just that he's very wound up to do it. He's a very energetic man. He's a very athletic man, and he's very smart. The wonderful thing about the film business is there's just not a lot of dumb people, so that you're always up against people. You can't really bullshit too much. You can give lots of compliments, but you can't, so he's not the kind of person that you can BS with too much, like try to fool him. And I like that. I like bottom line people because then you know where you stand, and you always know where you stand with John, good or bad. I thought we got along really well. We had a pretty good time on Up Close and Personal. I mean, there was a lot of stuff that went on, a lot of challenging sets, challenging locations, and challenging actor and actress. Redford and Michelle Pfeiffer are not people to be trifled with, and they do have to be, not managed or handled, but
it's a delicacy.
Well, it's yes, even more than that. I mean, you just have to be honest with them, and I like that too. I mean, Redford's just ridiculously charming and super smart, and Michelle had certain things that had to happen her way. She made no bones about it. She talked to everybody before the production started about how her hours had to be, and because she had 2 young kids, and made everybody aware of the constraints of her contract, and everybody abided by all that, and including John, except when things got where we needed things done that we didn't have a time period to do it without stretching Michelle's hours, and there were some bumps in that.
You worked with Michelle again on Batman Returns, and just to I've heard, I'm not sure how true it is, but I've saw footage, so I feel like it's true. A testament to her commitment and how serious she takes what she does. I heard that she actually her stunt woman for Catwoman just pretty much got to take a break for all the whip work that she trained herself, had to do all those.
She did
all those things. That's pretty incredible.
And she also
didn't have to.
Well, no, she didn't. But I don't think she would let herself get away with not doing it. She's that kind of person.
Yeah.
And she knew what the part entailed before she took it, and she took it seriously. And she was really good with the whip. I mean, there were people there, stunt people who were just like, whoa, I can't do that. And she literally was flicking stuff that the equivalent of knocking the ash off a cigarette kind of thing in this department store scene that she was in.
Yes, that's the behind the scenes clip that went viral. That's one I saw. She was in a department store and nailed 3 things off of and or something. And then
you heard the crew reaction.
Yeah, the whole crew.
People went nuts. I mean, when they cut the cameras, people just went crazy because it was really good. So that film gave me, John knew who I was. I knew who John was, right? And when he called me for Red Corner, I really wanted to do it, but kids and family first. And John understood, and he was nice about it. But then when he had a problem, and I was nearing the end of the time I'd set aside to be with my family, I cut it short by a few days. But I couldn't say no to him. He's, you love these people, you have a care for them, as well as having them be your boss, having them be a means of employment. You have, you have a care for them.
Yeah.
So I went into the show. It took me a long time to catch up on the script. It was in full bore. But Buddy Joe was there with stunt stuff, and but go ahead.
I heard that he went along with John Abnett that he took Bei Ling along with producer Martin Huberty and went to Beijing and shot guerrilla style for a week without the authorities knowing or permitting it. And it was actually the first ever 35 millimeter film of that city to appear in a Hollywood movie. I thought that was crazy. Like,
Well,
just
it is.
knowing the power that the Chinese government has over Hollywood, but it's a big market. You don't want to piss them off.
Well, you also don't want to do anything illegal in their eyes.
Yeah.
So that tells you about John in a nutshell.
Yeah, I thought that was interesting.
He wants what he wants. And if he doesn't get what he wants, then he finds a way to get what he wants. And I mean, that's a sign of a good director, but it's also a personal trait of his, that he's known for. Yeah. And I like all that stuff. I thought he was going to ask me to go to Beijing at one point with him. This was after the film was over. And I was secretly glad he didn't, because I was in the process of moving and on another show, but I wouldn't have said no to him if he'd have asked. But I don't think he needed more people than he actually really needed to do what he did. He's the man responsible for me living where I do now in Topanga Canyon, because I got a phone call from my wife when I was on the set. I said, "Excuse me, John, I just got to talk with Shannon." And he heard me talking about a realtor, and he said, "Oh, where are you moving?" After I hung up, and I said, "I'm looking at places in Topanga Canyon." And he went, "McGiffert, you got to go." He said, "I live in Topanga Canyon. It's a fantastic place. Every time you have to go and look at a house, put your second in charge of the show and go look at the house. You have to live there. You will love it." So if I hadn't gone and done the picture for John, I'm not sure I'd be living where I do. And I've been here for 27 years, and you can't dynamite me out of here.
That's
cool.
So
that's John. Buddy Joe and John, they were terrific together, and they were a source of humor for a lot of us crew people watching the two of them interact, because they wouldn't pay attention to the people around them. They would interact in their way and work out what they needed to work out in the way these two very strong personalities would be used to doing things. And obviously Joe is the employee, but he needed to work John around sometimes to the point where it was going to be something that was achievable in a safe way. And not that John was unsafe, but he wants, they get a vision of what they want. And sometimes that vision includes things that they don't want, but they don't know it, until it's kind of brought up. I don't know if that makes sense.
Yeah, it makes sense.
But they work together really well. But there was this challenge thing always in what they did. It was like, "John, come on, we're ready. The stunt's ready to go. Come on. Or John would be like, "Joe, where's Buddy Joe? What's up, man? Come on, man. We need to film. What are you doing? Where are you? You getting something to eat? Are you, and it would be that. So yeah, go ahead.
Sorry. So I'll set up the first part here and let you take it from there. So on a particular Friday evening, you were leaving the set for the weekend, and Buddy Joe stopped you in the parking lot. You assumed that he wanted to talk about a rooftop chase scene that was scheduled for Monday morning, but to your surprise, he didn't say anything about stunts. What actually transpired left you, in your own words, mystified. What did he say? What happened in the parking lot?
He said, "Hey, man, McGiffert, hey, I just want to let you know, I may not show up Monday." He said, but don't worry about it. My guys can handle it. It's all, everybody knows about it, and my guys. And I just wanted you to know so that you don't get thrown, and, just don't worry about it. It'll be okay. And I knew there was a huge stunt coming up, and it involved Richard Gere also, beside Richard Gere's stunt double. We're going to have the star up there zooming around, jumping off buildings and stuff. And I just said, "Joe, what are you talking about?" And he said, "Look, man, I know you'll keep John calm. Don't worry about it. My guys can handle it. See ya." And he walked off to his car. And I literally stood and watched him walk off while my brain just freewheeled. And I didn't understand that something had happened that Friday earlier in the day that I was not around. So, yeah.
So, so it's Monday morning. Buddy Joe is not there as promised. Abnett is asking where he's at, and you're reassuring him that he must be on the way, even insisting that you guys start rehearsing the stunt, and you're sure he'd get there. How did that feel, trying to like confidently convey something when all these people are like waiting, and you have this information of what John or what Buddy Joe said to you on Friday, but but you're so confident in that he's not going to be a no-show, but he still said that. Like, it's got to be whispering somewhere in the back of your mind, like, oh my God, like as you're telling, like, are you just hoping that you're not lying as you're saying these things out loud? Like, what's going through your head?
Well, I had a little bit of confidence because I still couldn't fully believe that he wasn't going to show up. I mean, who would do that?
Yeah.
So
casually too, the way he
just so friendly. I mean, because that's the way we are together. We're extremely familiar with each other. We don't. There's no holds barred. But he didn't tell me what the hell had happened. He left that blank. So I thought any minute he's going to show up, and if he doesn't, I'm not. I don't know how to work that one. And John didn't believe me at all. He was like, "Oh yeah, right. Sure, he's caught in traffic, right? Whatever." And he got impatient with me because he was impatient with Joe, and he was under time constraints. We had a lot of stuff scheduled that day, and it wasn't all just that one stunt.
Yeah.
I didn't know that his guys knew exactly what was going on. I had no idea. They didn't give me any hint that they did. The same with Scott Wilder, the guy who is doubling Richard Gere. He knew. Mm-hmm. But they didn't even, nothing. And of course, John's uptight with me because, with good reason. I'm the guy who's supposed to schedule these people, get people on time. Like, what's up?
Yeah.
And the Chinese background people are like, they do not like when things get tense. It makes them nervous. So the whole thing had this edge to it in the morning. We're all finishing our coffee, but suddenly there's an edge besides the stunt edge. So that's how that was going.
So with everybody ready to go, background actors are starting to shift uncomfortably. Abnett says, "That's it. I've had it with him. Who does he think he is, coming in whenever he wants, especially on a day like this? Let's go. We're doing the stunt." So you guys are proceeding without Buddy Joe. At that point, Scott Wilder, Gere's stunt double, he asked Abnett whether Buddy Joe not showing up might have something to do with what happened on Friday. What happened on Friday?
Okay, what happened on Friday? And the part that I didn't know was that sometime during the day, in a section of the set that I was not a part of, Scott Wilder had brought a quad runner. So because the set was pretty big, and he used this quad runner to ride around to check different aspects of the set that he needed to check on for various stunts that were coming up. And that saved him a lot of walking and running time. But at this particular point on Friday, he also had a very attractive assistant of John Abnett's riding on the back with him as he rode around. And we had a lot of extras on the set. So they're weaving their way through the extras. I find this out later. And the location manager noticed them go by and notice these people, the background people aren't paying attention to stuff that goes on. That's our job to focus them. And they're just waiting to do stuff. And he was afraid that somebody would step in front of the quad runner or, something would happen. So he came to, I think he came to me. No, how did that work? Oh, he went to Buddy Joe. He went straight to, that's why I didn't know about it. He went to Buddy Joe and he said, "Look, Buddy Joe, you got to stop Scott from riding around like that. It's dangerous. Look at all these people. They don't know what they're doing. And, that's dangerous." And Buddy Joe talked to Scott and said, "Look," or Scott, I think I quote Scott as saying he gave me a very spirited ass chewing.
Yes.
Right. And that would be Buddy Joe. It would be 1-to-1 away from everybody, but it would be like, "What are you doing?" Mm-hmm. And so Scott was in trouble. He had to go and load up the quad runner and put it away. So Scott mentioned this in passing a half hour later or so to John. He said, "Man, I just got my ass chewed." And Avnet said, "What do you mean?" And he told him what had happened. And apparently, at that point, the two men, I don't know what triggered it, but they decided that might be fun to play a prank on Buddy Joe. Shall I go on?
Yes, please. What was the prank?
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. They came up with the idea. They got the first aid man and a couple of other people, the wardrobe person, I think, and the makeup person, and they staged a fake quad runner accident with the girl assistant, with Avnet's girl assistant. And she was on the ground. I never saw it. I don't know where the hell I was, but I wasn't there. And I think
Smart.
they had some blood on her. Well, I don't know what I was doing. And they, they made it look as though there'd been a fairly serious accident. They had the first aid man down there pretending to care for her. And then they called Buddy Joe on the radio on his channel. And they said, "Look, Buddy Joe, you got to get over here. Something bad's happened. We need help." And Buddy Joe came over and saw this girl and just totally freaked. And the first thing he did was he got Scott Wilder off to the side and he said, "After this stunt on Monday, you're fired." I said, he said, "I told you what had to happen. This cannot happen. This is not the way we can work. You're out of here." And then he went back and was just so worried about this girl, and he didn't know what to do, and he's overwhelmed.
And then, and Avnet lets him stew for a few minutes in
Yeah.
that anxiety, right? Before
Yes.
revealing that. So what was his, of course, like you have the whole crew laughing, they're all in on it. So in that moment, you have to embrace the humor and respect what went into what just fooled you, even though it might have stung a little bit and you're shook up.
Yeah, it wasn't the whole crew, because the whole crew, I think, was getting a shot ready somewhere else. But there were elements of the crew there. And after a few minutes, I mean, Joe was pretty upset, so they didn't want to let it go, stupidly long, because he was having an effect on him. So they finally just started laughing, and the girl got up, I'm guessing. Nobody ever told me this, but I'm sure the girl said she was okay. The first aid man and everybody was kind of laughing about it. And, Joe had a laugh. "Man, that was a really good one, ha ha ha." But he said in the instant that he was laughing about it, he also immediately started plotting
how to get the last laugh.
What had to happen as a rejoinder to this, because you can't just let those things ride.
So after that, Scott Wilder, who got his job back at this point, no longer fired on Monday, wanted to make amends with Buddy Joe for the joke. So he called him over the weekend and they came up with the plan. So we're back to Monday. Buddy Joe is nowhere to be found. Avnet has decided to go forward with the big stunt without him. Richard Gere, Scott Wilder, and the other stunt actors stage a rooftop chase sequence exactly as Buddy Joe previously laid out for them, and they pull it off without a problem. Avnet's satisfied with that, but there's still no sign of Buddy Joe. So you guys move on to the next scene, which would show Richard Gere and Beiling being driven from prison to the custody of the Chinese government, and their car gets attacked on a crowded street before Gere escapes, and you're in the midst of a background rehearsal. And what happens while you're in the background rehearsal?
Well, we're trying to help people understand what's going to happen with the cast and then how we'd like them to react. And we're trying to, we have a lot of people there, so we're trying to make it lots of different kinds of reactions, not just a mass kind of weird thing. So I have a bunch of people around me, and this little old man comes up in front of me, one of the extras. He's got a cone hat on, as some of them do. And he's kind of stooped over and he shuffles up to the front. And then I start to move away and he taps me or does something, and he raises the cone hat and winks at me. And my jaw hit the ground, because it was Buddy Joe in full Chinese makeup and wardrobe. And he said, "Hey man, I've been here the whole time. I had to see how the stunt went, obviously, you know me. He said, but I got a couple of other things I got to do. I just don't want you to be thrown. Just don't worry about it. It's going to be okay. And I was like, wait, and he was gone. He faded into the crowd.
I gotta tell you, that's one of my favorite parts of the whole story, because just I could picture like he left you the same way he did in the parking lot on Friday, like and like stunned, like, and the way you say he faded back, I could picture that so well mentally of like just seeing him like turn in to see him just in time to disappear into the crowd, and after saying something ominous like that.
I couldn't answer fast enough. I was so stunned. I couldn't find words. I was like, but, and he was gone. So I can't go running after him. We're just about ready to do the shot. I can't stop everything and go figure out what the heck he's talking about. So I just go on with what I know has to happen, which is, getting the background ready, getting the cast brought in, I don't know if we did a rehearsal or not. I think we probably had to. And, the rehearsal kind of probably went well. And then, John goes, okay, let's go, and he's back at a video village somewhere, a little away from the set, the way those have to be. And we roll the cameras, we cue the background, John cues the actors, Richard gets out of the car and looks around and takes off. And Beiling, I think, gets out of the car. I'm so stunned at this aspect of it that I don't really remember clearly. I had to have Buddy Joe fill me in on this part. And she got out, and all of a sudden, this little old man in a cone hat goes, no can do, no can do, no. And he's waving his arms and running in and grabs the actress. And of course, she totally freaked. People around, the background people, it kind of radiates out, and everything just came to a stop. And Abnett shoots up out of his chair. He's like, cut, what the hell is going on in there?
Yeah. So, of course, so at this point, Buddy Joe, full costume, jumps on Abnett from behind and in a friendly way, wrestles him to the ground. And he says, I've been here right beside you the whole time, John, and you never even noticed. Good morning. That is what happened after that? Like, how did they? You said in the story that they were at that point, they fell right back into the natural flow of things.
Well, after they helped each other up. After Abnett said, man, that was a really good one, man. He said, that was so crazy, but it was a really good one. And everybody realized that this kind of crazy classic on-set joke had happened, and the background people got it less because they didn't know these two guys and didn't know that there was a previous thing. But, most of the crew and all the stunt guys, of course, we just thought it was like amazing. Mm-hmm. And as I wrote, in the back, the makeup and wardrobe people are high-fiving, because they carried it off. And, again, as I wrote, it's, we realized we'd seen kind of an instant onset classic, it's something to talk about for a while.
Yeah. Like how far along in the production were you guys? Like, how long did you work together after that?
I think we had about a third of the show to go. So there and a bunch of stunt stuff. I mean, some driving stuff that was tricky, and so it wasn't as though that was the end of the stunt. And they just went right on with the day after they shook hands and helped each other up and had a kind of a laugh and a couple of seconds to kind of go over things. And we had to get everybody kind of focused again. And then we just went right on with the day,
Was because Buddy Joe fired the last shot, was he on his toes for the remainder of the production, waiting for Abnett's response?
I never even thought about it, because there was just a rolling series of things that they would do with each other, not as heavy duty as that one, not as memorable as that one, but they were always, in their way, it was their way of boosting each other, of challenging them and and making them work hard and making sure the details were covered and keeping themselves focused. That was kind of how they did it with each other.
It's such an awesome story. The way you tell the story is so great too, because even that one chapter is like a Pulp Fiction film. It's like it's laid out like, it's like, well, this happened on Friday afternoon. Let's go back to Friday morning or early Friday afternoon to see why that happened on Friday. And now we're on Monday. Let's go back over the weekend and see what was planned and what's actually happened. It was really cool the way it went. Like the way you unfolded things in that chapter made like only added to the humor, because I got to kind of realize all these things at the same time that you did in the course of events. So it was just, it made it that much funnier. Like I feel like I can appreciate the story even more than John Abnett can, because John Abnett didn't know. Well, I'm sure he does now, going back and if he looks at the story, but just everything that was happening, just the way it's laid out, it makes it so humorous. It's done so well.
Thank you. I have to tell you though, when I first wrote the story, I wanted to make sure that I had the details right. And there were some things that were fuzzy, because, one thing with writing stories that are anecdotal, which is what they have to be, nobody remembers every situation perfectly. And then when you have a couple of decades intervening. So when I wrote these, I did the best I could to actually, if I was unclear about anything, I tried to find people who could either confirm what I was thinking or not. And there were some aspects of the story when I sent it to Buddy Joe. I said, would you look at this? I just wrote it. And he said, yeah, man, this is in essence what happened. But actually, he said, I talked to Scott Wilder about it, and Scott remembers these things happen. And honestly, it wasn't quite this way. It was this way. And so I incorporated their remembrances of it into what I'd written already. And it did change quite a bit of the story. I was kind of thrown by it, but that was the story in all of them that I wrote that I had the most trouble with and making sure, but that was the one I remembered the least. I only remembered the outcome and the confusion, but I didn't remember the intervening story as well as they told me later.
I think that's what I meant by me appreciating it more than any singular perspective, because that's what's so cool about it, is you give your perspective, and then like before you move on to the next course of events, you go back and say, well, let's provide a little context here. Here's John Abnett's perspective, or here's Buddy Joe's perspective, or Wilder's perspective. Like after you've lived what your perception of what just happened was, then you go back and clarify it. It was really neat the way it played out like that. You get everybody's like, I got to the first, like what happened on Monday, and I did not think I was going to get to go back and find out in real time, as you found out, why what was happening. It made it that much more it was set up like a perfect punchline. It was great.
Well, that was also very troublesome in the story, how to align the events so that I could give the feeling that I had as I went through it. So thank you.
Yeah, you nailed it. It was perfect.
Thanks.
Before I have 4 questions in the spirit of Halloween that I wanted to end us out on. Before I do that, before we move on from the story, just wanted to do one more reminder to go to davidmcgiffert.com, get the book Best Seat in the House. There's like over 100 other stories just like this one in the book. So go get that now.
About 84 more stories. Yeah. And they're each chapters. They're chapters. No one story needs the other story to exist. They all exist on their own. It's for people with short attention spans. So
yeah. Thank you.
All us ADD people, which I think is a really great trait to have. I'm happy to be that way if that's the way I am. But also, these are who would not love having an experience like that? And I had them all through my working life. And so that's what I wanted to impart. It isn't, oh, John Adnett's this way and Buddy Joe Hooker's this way. It's like these experiences are happening in the midst of, trying to get a film done with stunts and with hundreds of Chinese people, many of whom do not speak English, and to try to convey the story the way the director wants it conveyed for him, and being attuned to all these things. That's the thing that I loved about my work. That's what I'm trying to get across to people in the book. It's not like, oh, Michelle Pfeiffer's like this really cool person, or Robert Redford. It isn't about that. It's about all of us as people.
You convey it so perfectly, like excuse me, and I could like that chapter that we did today, I think it's like a page and a half, maybe 2 pages, and I had asked some questions about what John Abnett is like to work with, or what Buddy Joe is like, what their personalities are like. But the funny thing is that while reading that 2 pages, not only did you lay out the events that happen in the story perfectly, but just in the way that you the parts that you selected, and how you quoted things that John Abnett said, I already had a very, very good a very good idea of what their personalities were like just in the short experience that you share from them. And I think that's a testament to the writings. I had that, when you just in the way that you described how John Abnett was responding on Monday morning, and the way he says, yeah, sure, when, and the way you say he's scowling at you, I never read that as oh, it's some jerk director. The way you conveyed it in the writing, it was you could tell there was that there's a playfulness to it that was conveyed in the midst of the seriousness.
Yeah. We personally had a relationship that allowed him to be that way with me, and I accepted it as my part of the relationship too. He was allowed to be tense. Who wouldn't be tense when your stunt coordinator doesn't show up? Sure, he's going to be impatient with me. I'm trying to calm him down, not knowing what the hell's going on,
But the writing is done so well that all that is implied, the background of the relationship is just implied in the writing, where it won't get misunderstood, I don't think.
Good. I especially don't want John to misunderstand it, and I'd also written about, Up Close and Personal, a few episodes that happened on that involved John. And, they do, he was one of my favorite directors because he had high energy, high expectations, really worked hard at what he was doing, expected everybody to work hard at what they were doing, and wanted it to happen right. And so I couldn't help but have good memories of him. And some of them are funny. They're just weird, but they show the kinds of stuff that go on that people don't know. They just don't know.
Yeah. Okay, so in the spirit of Halloween, here are my 4 questions. The first one is have there been, I know that what we talked about today isn't technically it was a scare for Buddy Joe, and I'm sure John Abnett was pretty uncomfortable on Monday morning until he figured out what was happening. But and we've also talked about, the infamous incident on Back to the Future 3. Has there been any other scares on set that stand out to you?
Sure.
Is there one in particular that you would like that you'd like to share?
Yeah, there are many I don't want to share because that's a part of the business that I'm not interested in talking about. Oh, this was bad but I have a very good friend named Charlie Kroll, who was Michael Fox's stunt double. That's how we started in the business. But at this point, it was on Batman Returns, and he was doubling Danny DeVito as, the Penguin. And we were on a set at Universal that had huge high ceilings. It had all these penguins swimming around in the water. We had a lot of water at different levels of the set. It was an extremely ambitious set. And there's a point in the film where Danny DeVito jumps off this very high section of this underground sewer that he's supposed to be in and lands in the water. It was easily 30 feet, 25 feet. That's a long way to drop. But Charlie is a very slender, athletic guy, and Danny DeVito is not. And he was wearing also a suit that made him look even rounder and bigger, so that Charlie had to put on a suit commensurate with Danny's size, obviously, to make him look like that, and makeup and all this stuff. And I kept asking him, Charlie, that's a really long way. And he's like, David, he has this wonderful flat voice that he uses when he's David, please, I got it. Don't worry about it. You'll be down there. Just get the shot. We'll be okay. I know you're concerned. And I went to him like 2 or 3 times. I said, you sure? He said, David, it's okay. I got it. I said, okay. But my heart was in my mouth. We rolled the cameras and he jumped. When he hit the water, David, that suit stopped him instantly. The mass of the suit. So it was like dropping on cement and you could hear it. It just went whomp when he hit the water, and everybody, I could see it out of the corner of my head, everybody just tensed, and it knocked the shit out of him. I mean, it hurt. And you could tell. And, he came, we had people in the water to go get him and help him, but I think he came out on his own. And he was, out of breath. It hurt. And I remember really worrying about that because I love this guy. He's a very special man. He just did Ron Howard's movie about the 13 kids that were trapped underwater. Was it, that one? He was the stunt coordinator and all that. Well, I mean, that's the level he's at now.
Something like that. What happened was, it seems like that's something that you couldn't foresee. Like a wardrobe creating a mishap like that. Did you just have a bad feeling about it while you had talked to him a few times and weren't exactly sure? Just didn't feel right about it?
Yeah. I mean, I don't go to people and go, hey, are you sure this is going to be okay? I mean, that's not my job.
Yeah.
They've done all that. All that work is done before they come to the set. They've run through all the permutations of what could go wrong. And they're people and trust, and you've seen their work before. But I had a personal feeling about it that overrode my AD part, where you're supposed to be cool and just roll the cameras and let that baby fly,
Yeah.
I don't know. I can't tell you what it was, because those kinds of things are spontaneous. They're not things that you are consciously aiming at thinking about. They just come up. And I follow them. When I get them, I follow them, even though I might look dumb, because there have been times when those intuitive little hits that you get actually help. I mean, I actually saved Charlie a big injury on Back to the Future 3. I might have told you. I don't know.
Yes. That, I feel like that intuition that you're talking about I feel like that clicks on like in hyperdrive once you become a parent too. And that's when you really begin to, even if you don't always fully trust it, to at least, it's a lot louder. So it becomes a little bit harder to ignore.
You're so right. And now imagine that you feel as though you're the parent for a shooting crew.
Yeah.
So, I mean, that's the way I did feel. Not like I was the adult, but like you have a parental concern for people's safety. That's your job.
Mm-hmm.
People miss that all the time about ADs. And AD is responsible for the personal safety of every person on the set.
Yeah.
Period. And you've heard, I mean, ADs get sued if somebody gets hurt, or if you knowingly do something that you know could result in somebody getting hurt, and you didn't take the time to try to adjust it. All that responsibility has the potential, not always, but it has the potential to flow back to the AD. And so, sometimes ADs are mocked for saying, hey, are you sure about, or we got to have a safety meeting? And everybody's like, oh man, not another safety meeting. But now it's kind of turned around. And now people actually are much more concerned with safety. They understand that it's a crew-wide sense of responsibility for each other, but it's still the AD that is the guy or woman that needs to be watching that.
Yeah. I would try to find like another project that you had worked on that was horror related, and I landed on Tales from the Crypt, which you worked on with Robert Zemeckis, and it stood out to me even more because the episode that you did and All Through the House, this was directed by Fred Decker, and Halloween month we're doing Monster Squad, which was of course written and directed by Fred Decker, co-written and directed by Fred Decker.
Right.
Also had Mary Ellen Trainor, also from Monster Squad.
Bob directed it. Bob Zemeckis directed it. Yeah.
Yes, right. But Fred. The episode was why do I have the episode was directed by Fred Decker? Oh, he wrote the episode. That's
he
right.
May have, right. It's All Through the House you're talking about?
Yeah, he wrote that. He co-wrote and directed Monster Squad. He wrote the episode with Robert Zemeckis. Yes. And then it also had Mary Ellen Trainor, who was also in Monster Squad. Rest in peace. She was also in the Goonies. She's like the 80s mom. What was that set like to work on? I grew up on Tales from the Crypt, and the flavor of those were just it's just a darkness to them. It was so much fun.
Oh yes, well I just did a podcast with a guy called Tales from the Crypt Dads, nice. And he asked if I would to talk about that episode with him, and I said sure, why not? But this was we the whole crew from Back to the Future 1, when Bob said, hey, I'm thinking maybe we're going to do Back to the Future 2, who's in? Everybody's like, boom. The whole crew wanted to come back. I mean, and mostly everybody did. So there we are, we're beginning to prep Back to the Future 2, and suddenly we're being told that there's a giant pause button being hit, and we're going to be off the show for a while. And so everybody is going off the show for a while. What do I do? If another job comes through, do I take it? Any chance of being paid while we're off? Does anybody know what the time period is? What was happening was that Bob had gone to the studio and said, look, this script for Back to the Future 2 cannot be told without it being 2 movies. And the studio went into red alert. That's not what they had understood. That's not what they were budgeting for. And so everything stopped. And Bob said, we have to figure this out. That's what the pause was. We didn't know it at the time. But in the meantime, also, and this is something I didn't know until later, Bob was one of the investors or producers of Tales from the Crypt. Yeah. So he took some of the time on the intervening of resurrecting Back to the Future 2 to become Back to the Future 2 and 3 to direct one of I think it was the second episode in the series, and it was important. And he said, what do you say we all go over, and why don't you guys all come over with me, and we'll do Tales from the Crypt. We'll do an episode of Tales from the Crypt. And then you guys can be on payroll, and we'll all be still together, and that'll help keep everything together. And we're all like, let's go.
Well, that's interesting.
Yeah. So we shot it in a warehouse out near Magic Mountain, which is on the outskirts of LA. Well, a warehouse does not have set perms, they call it, the high ceilings. It did not have high ceilings. It was maybe a story and a half or 2 stories high, which for lighting is a nightmare. It had to snow. So the snow they used was kind of a derivative of cotton that would float down and look nice, and they'd spray other stuff on the ground. But that stuff also had little bits of fiberglass in it and stuff, and we're all breathing that. So that was exciting. And it was very hot, and it didn't have efficient air conditioning. And it was kind of hot in LA, the way it gets. So that was the setting. And it's a very bloody episode. I mean, that guy comes in, the Santa Claus is a slasher, right? And comes in and just like mows down Mary Ellen Trainor's husband or something. I think that's how it happened. And so it had a lot going on, and Bob shot it like a feature. So it wasn't like a 4-day shooting schedule. It was like, I don't know, at least a week and a half, because Bob doesn't shoot stuff that isn't right.
Yeah.
And so he's not going to take shortcuts and oh, that's good. One take's great. Let's go. No, it had to be all right. And now he had his wife in it, and so it was it kept everybody working. It kept the crew together. I thought it was a good episode. Turned out well. We had our usual gallows humor fun, with all the stuff.
What was the podcast that you said you had talked about that on, the Crypt Dads? Is that what it is?
The Dads from the Crypt, maybe.
Dads. Okay. I'll find it. Make sure it's linked in there, because I'm sure you went into a little bit more detail if people are interested to hear more about that story.
It's just me babbling, Oh God.
Some people really enjoy babbling. I enjoy babbling.
I like talking about it with people who know what I mean, It's more than advertising, it's something that I loved, and I'm sharing it with people that love it to the same degree. I mean, you talked with Wayne Byrne a few days ago. I mean, you can tell this guy loves what he writes about, loves what he's doing, cares about it. And he had a great time with you. He said,
had a great time with him.
Oh man, that was so fun. He said, my throat gave out. He said, I was having to drink a bottle of lager off to the side because I couldn't talk anymore. Yeah. He said it was fun.
We could have went. Yeah. It was, it could have easily went off the rails, because 2 Nightmare on Elm Street fans that have never spoke before, I'm surprised we kept it under right at 2 hours. So my last 2 questions is, and whatever, you could answer them in any order you want to, because I think the first one might require a little bit of jog in the memory. So the first question is, if you have a scariest nightmare that stands out to you, and the other one is, what's your favorite scary movie?
Okay. Do I have a nightmare? Well, I've told you it's not actually a nightmare, but the cumulative effect becomes a nightmare when you're on a shooting set in your dreams, and nobody seems to know you're there, and it's your responsibility to make the thing go, and you're trying to find people that have various job categories that you need to talk to make things go. I had a dream like that about Cameron Crowe on a set 2 nights ago. Cameron and I are getting along great, but we can't make anything happen. And there's all these crew people. There's this huge meadow of crew people walking around, and we can't get it going. I've told you this. I have dreams about being on a shooting set at least once or twice a week, all year long, 4 years. So I would say I would like to have that be my cumulative nightmare. If you can imagine, like 15 years of having that happen. As far as a scary movie goes, I mean, the Stanley Kubrick Shining, made the hair stand up.
The classic. Did you see Dr. Sleep?
No, I didn't.
I was very fascinated by Dr. Sleep. When we did the sequels on the live show, that was actually my number 1 sequel that I think I've ever seen. There have been so many, like Terminator 2 is a fantastic sequel, and the Batman Returns is great, and Dark Knight Rises or Dark Knight, but like all of those were just great sequels. They were great movies, but Dr. Sleep did something really interesting, and that, like, because there's always been like a little bit of contention between Stephen King and Stanley Kubrick's the way he interpreted Stephen King's novel, and the abstractness of it and the Kubrickness of it, I guess, never sat well with King. And what I can't remember the guy's name, same guy that did the Haunting of Hill House, that series, he did Dr. Sleep, and what he with Dr. Sleep, it's a standalone movie that's great on its own, but at the same time, it like it goes back and kind of strips away some of the abstractness of The Shining, and Kubrick would probably be rolling in his grave after, like, no, nobody tries to, like, put the puzzle together that I did. But Dr. Sleep kind of takes those puzzle pieces from The Shining and arranges them in a way that almost makes them more gratifying than they already were. And it's a great movie on its own. And Stephen King, like, even said that Dr. Sleep made him appreciate The Shining more. So I thought, like, the sequel,
that's very interesting.
Yeah, see, it did what all sequels should aspire to do, is, like, not only be a great movie, but make the original better for its existence. So you said you think The Shining would be your go-to. Are you like a horror? Do you watch horror movies much?
No.
Yeah, and
I don't put that in my head if I can help it. I'll tell you another one that really rocked me was No Country for Old Men.
That's a very interesting one too.
That guy's portrayal, Bardem's portrayal of that guy, was peerless.
Ice cold, soulless, yeah.
Peerless. What a psychological nightmare that guy threw out.
It's really funny. That movie is, like, it's so smart, and of course the Coen brothers are amazing.
It's an electrifying movie.
But, like, at the core of that movie, it's really it's not much different than, like he reminds me of Michael Myers, the way he's just an ominous force that you can't escape, and he's never really in a rush, but he always gets to you. Like,
yep.
It's
inexorable, right?
Mm-hmm.
And that, the little scene with the guy in the gas station,
Brendo.
Call it, well, why do I have to do that? Oh no, you need to do it, And we know what he doesn't know, but he feels, I thought a lot of that was very strong.
Yeah, that's a good one. That's that's like the suspense in that. I don't even think that would be classified as I think it is classified as a suspense, but it's not really a traditional horror. But it's scarier than most horror films.
It crosses the line. Let's put it that way.
Yeah.
But I don't go out of my way to watch horror movies. I don't think I've ever seen Nightmare on Elm Street. I'm not sure about that. But I don't think so. And I think I should, because there's a whole section of cinema people out there who love these films and who care about them. So I think I kind of owe it to myself to catch up. But I can't do that around my family. My family will not go there at all. Zero. No.
I've always appreciated horror films, because, like, when you're done being a kid and you stop watching animated movies and like animated films or family films, then you don't really have an option for, like, big imagination, like drama, romance, action, comedy. As far as adult films goes, they just seem to be very cut and dry and grounded in reality for the most part.
I agree.
Horror kind of, it's like imagination for adults.
That's right. It does. It taps into the psyche at a level that you don't actually run around with every day, but it's there. Yeah. Because you recognize all the stuff that's going on. It's like, oh shit, But so yes, I respect that genre. And I know that I asked Dean Cundy about, what it was like when they did, like, things like The Fog and The Thing, and stuff like that. And they said, oh man, we had the best time. They had so much fun on those films. And then I wanted to jump back to Stanley Kubrick, because I asked Sidney what it was like working on the film that he did with him, which I can't remember the name of. And I said, how did you, that one that Tom Cruise and Nicole were in and Sidney was in?
Eyes Wide Shut?
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
Oh, wow. Okay. I didn't
he was
realize
there for months, months and months and months. And his part wasn't that big. He said, but it's unbelievable. We were there Tom and Nicole and I were there for months. He said, he's so crazy. I said, he's really good. I really admire him. That's why I went. He said, but years earlier, he used to be so worried that somebody was coming after his film. He used to drive around with all the negative of the film he was doing in the trunk of his car.
Wow. That
And in the earlier films, he would also ride around with the crew. I heard this, I think, from an assistant director that worked with him. He said, Stanley would set out and we'd have this long line of cars. We'd be driving around wherever we were. And then he'd stop and say, okay, we're going to film here. And everybody would like pull up, offload stuff. And Stanley would come up with the scene he wanted to do. I mean, just, I've never heard of anybody doing that.
Yeah, he is. The stories that I hear about him are just, and it's funny, that group that you invited me to on Facebook, the Cruise Stories. It's a very the Stanley Kubrick camp is very divided in that group. It's like there's there's the people that treasure him for the filmmaker that he was and the things that he gave us, and then, but now like like the way you said, people take safety on set a lot more serious now, and these things are talked about a lot more. Like now, Stanley Kubrick's time is coming where people are starting to go back and judge him for the things he did to Shelley Duvall on The Shining. Like, it's weird how things change like that. Like when I first started getting into filmmaking, these were things that you'd wear as like a badge of honor. Like we tortured ourselves this much, or I went through this much to get that shot, and now it's like, you don't brag about those things. That just makes life harder for people that are coming after you.
Yeah, there used to be a lot of discussion when I was working. There were certain people that we worked with, certain cast people and certain directors that only felt that they were doing a worthy film if it was hard. And so if things were going well, they would stir it up. Yeah. They would do something where it got hard. And I never quite understood that philosophy, because I think doing a good film under any circumstance is hard. To what degree that is, and where along the line of physicality or mental part, I don't know. But I mean, to put together a film that works and comes out at the other end with what your intent was in the beginning is not easy.
Yeah, it's a feat. Yeah, even to do it poorly, it's still it could still end up being a challenge. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, and that goes for something that you're doing right now to guide it along on the track that you want for your time segment. I mean, on up to features, it's the same thing. It's hard enough.
Yeah, every project starts with what you have in mind, and then there's compromises in between, and then you hope that what comes out after the compromises and the logistics is somewhat resembling what you originally had in mind that you started off with.
Yeah, and I'm not saying it should be easy. That's not the point. The point is,
don't make it harder.
The work will provide the degree of difficulty you would like.
Yeah, you don't have to go looking for problems. They'll come. Yeah. Just be ready.
Or stir it up behind the scenes. I mean, I've known people who do that on purpose. Just like, really? Yeah.
Well, thank you once again, David. Is there any final thoughts that you want to leave the audience with before I stop rolling?
No, I hope that if they do buy the book and they have any comments about it or an opinion about it, I'd love to see people's opinions. I don't know where that would be, but if they have a good feeling about it and maybe tell their friends. I mean, it's not about commercial success. It's about just getting a point of view around, and this was mine.
I'm sure. Would you would you like people to reach out to you via email or social media?
If they go to David McGiffert book at Gmail, they'll reach me directly.
Okay, that way.
And I'll do my best to answer.
Great, yeah, because I feel like there's the book is a great conversation starter, especially for somebody that loves movies. And if they're reading it, I could imagine that they'd want to at least let you know what their favorite story was, or if they had follow-up questions they might want to ask. I figured you might be the kind of person who would enjoy.
I'm also on Facebook. just look up my name, and I'll be glad to write them or do whatever. Yeah, I mean, I like, I never got a chance because I had a family so late in life. I never had a chance to like give back. I always wanted to go to the Directors Guild and be able to talk to these new people who are coming up and give them a point of view that might not be like the training program to the, I have a little bit of a looser approach to it than that, and a little bit of more of maybe I don't know what, anyway, it's my personal approach. There are so many good ADs out there, but so hearing a wide range of points of view of how to do things is important, and that's one of the reasons I wrote what I did.
Well, until next time, if you're watching this, go get the book. Go to davidmcgiffert.com. Thank you once again, David. Until next time.
Or Facebook or David McGiffert book at Gmail is an email that'll go directly to me.
All right. Have a good night, Dave. Thank you. I'll talk to you again.
Okay.
All right.
Take
Bye-bye.
care. Bye.
Hey guys, hey gals, did you like that?
Mm-hmm.
I know I did. And here's something YouTube thinks you'll like. They've actually recommended. What do you recommend?
I recommend that if you have not subscribed to our channel, that you please click right down there and make sure you correct that wrong this very instant.
Let me ask a question. Where can they find us?
All those places over there, we're everywhere. Everywhere.
We thought we could do a cooler outro. We're just going to walk away now.